Here we have timber for building, and let's just imagine that we're in a bookshop and we're just flipping through this. You want to know what's inside. So there is a long list of contents, and we'll flip through the contents shortly, and then a long list of illustrations which amount to 101 illustrations, photos basically mainly, and then there's a bit about the author and why we want to get involved in milling our own timber and general thoughts about it. So let's go back to the contents and flip through it. Growing trees, and there's a lot about growing trees, as you can see there. These is all the subheadings basically about knots and branch collars and the grain. But let's pop down here. We've got species and their properties, and there's a long list there: oak, ash, sycamore. Bit further down, birch, sweet chestnut, cherry, and then some of the pines: Scots, Corsican, Austrian, Monterey, Douglas, larch, Norway spruce, Lawson cypress, the cypresses, western red cedar, western hemlock. And then there's a big section about conversion methods, so manual or mechanical. And then we're talking here about measuring timber and conversion efficiency. The lower down, it's about how timber dries and the drying process. So let's have a look at that. Making your own dehumidifier, 146. Here we go. Making your own dehumidifier kiln. I've got a lot of experience of this. Let me just adjust this block. A lot of experience in this. Done it for years. There's making your own kiln, general designs, kiln drying faults, and then there's a bit about transporting timber. That's moving it in the wood and moving it either from the wood to your workshop area, or the main thing about these mobile saws is to convert the timber in the wood. That way you're not moving a lot of heavy bulk. Move lots of little bits as opposed to one or two big bits. But we've got various options here, and there's a load of oak all laid out ready for sale. Timber lorry, and that's particularly good. Bit of an overloaded trailer really. Then you've got timber preparation, which is manual and mechanical resawing and planing. There's quite a lot about that. Quite a lot the manual side, and then we've got dimension saws and dimension saws to use to make rebates, and that's a cutter block out of a big planer. So there's a lot about planers. Sharp things and dangerous machinery. That's always a thing to focus the mind. And then we got reflections, which is sort of pulling the whole thing together, thinking about local timber and local markets. And a photo here of actually a joist with a dovetail housing on the end. So you don't use steel hangers, you actually create a housing and then a dovetail to hold it all together. But coming back some, let's go to the start, shall we? See, there's quite a lot here, and this is distilled experiences from 30 years of working in the timber trade and forestry and joinery and construction. There's quite a bit here, and I'm flipping through quite a few pages at a time. So this is about annual rings, how trees grow. That bit back there was all about how to get good timber, how to grow good timber. Here we got annual rings, which starts off relatively far apart and gets narrower and narrower because the stand hasn't been thinned. If you had a compartment thinned correctly, as these rings get narrower and narrower, they would then thin the compartment and you would see the annual rings get wider again instead of continuing to get narrower and narrower. Bit about knots, where you want the knots in the piece of timber and how much clear timber you need, the different types of knots, and what happens when you prune branches and how the tree grows round it. There's quite a bit about the grain structure and how you can see it on a board. There's a big section, and I'm not going to go through that too much, but the big section on felling trees, mainly on the things not to do, all the dodgy things that can happen, like you can die, keeping out of jail and out of hospital, about hung up trees, site organisation. There's quite a lot in there. Logs and roundwood. So I used to buy a lot of timber in the round, so that's a load of experience of that. And then you've got defects that you're looking for in timber, in log. There's a younger version of the author with a big oak log there, and some more defects where a branch has grown over, maybe it's pruned or maybe it just snapped off, but the rot has got in. So the rot's got in before the tree was able to finally close over the wound. Blue stain and spiral grain. Spiral grain can be seen in softwoods and hardwoods. There you've got impact damage within a tree. That obviously was the outside at one time, and you can see the remnants of a scrape or mammalian or mechanical damage. Oak logs. Then you've got included bark on the bark ridge where you've got a branch, and you can see there inside. These are all faults and bark grows where a branch has been and it's all grown over, but you can still see it. And believe it or not, that is not a symmetrical photo. That's just as it is. You can see that face and the two eyes. Then there's a big wedge about the species, which we've already mentioned. Keep going on about that. Conversion methods. Now, we've talked about that a bit, but there's quite a lot in there, so I'm going to flip through quite a few pages. Yeah, and then you've got the chainsaw type. Initially it's hand tools, side axe and whatnot, and there we are, cleaving shingles, and a bit of history, and there's a pit saw. Now we've got a different type of chainsaw based mill, and then a trailer mounted type, and then you've got the Peterson type, which is a swing saw, which, because it can swing, means you don't have to cut right through the log in one pass. As you can see here, you can cut out the pieces that you require as you go along. And there's my rack saw there, which is a insert tooth circular saw, and then narrow band saws, and there's a lot about picture band saws, etc., and there are quite a few different types. And there's another one there. That's a ground mounted one, which actually has wheels that you remove. And then this guy here, one of our Eco Lodge guests, Simon, He's obviously not wearing a helmet because the blade's not going round. This is purely for examples. How to cut. So you cut 2 sides, then you cut a 3rd side, and then you cut the boards. And there's the boards being nailed onto a building that I constructed a few years ago. There's how to measure standing timber, individual logs, stack measure, and then conversion efficiency. What will affect the efficiency in volume between the log and the final boards or what have you. Sharpening and maintenance, different types of tooth profile. There's an insert tooth, and here's how to set soft blades, what we call soft, which is tempered blades. You can set the teeth. How timber dries, and there's a whole load here about the moisture content of various timbers on a on an oven dried basis, and there's a video about that as well. Yeah, and then the drying process, and what happens if you don't convert the timber and you leave it in the log, and how that relates to the various drying faults. And stacking timber, air drying it in stick, and there it is again. And then kiln drying. I went up to Wazel Wood Floors and took some photos of their big industrial kiln, and then we're back to where we were with the dehumidifier kilns. Hopefully you'll find this an enjoyable read.